Alright, so simply put, what is Burning Sun about? If you say Burning Sun right now, you will literally think there's a lot of bad things that happened at this club, so it had to get shut down. And you ask, what bad things? Well, Sung-mi from Big Bang did lots of bad things. He got prostitutes and drugs for foreign investors, plus he went overseas to gamble a lot, and then he also embezzled money from his company. Bad things. When it should be, what kind of bad things? Well, if your daughter went to that club, paid $20 to get in, even spent money to buy her own drinks, she would have been packaged into a commodity to then get sexually assaulted by being drugged with probably GHB in her drink, then hauled off to a motel by a VIP customer who was probably more often than not a foreigner, but a Korean person. And then the next morning, even if she went to the police or to the club to report it, they wouldn't help her because they are all on the same team, profiting off of the same VIPs. And these VIPs are most likely the kids of very powerful families or politicians. And that was the main story that they wanted to cover up. So you have to really think about who did not want this story to get out there, and those are most likely the people who are the actual culprits. Yes, Sung-mi decided to go down this road to conduct business in this manner, to create a forum for all of this to take place. He deserves probably even more than he got. He got off lucky, I would say. Not lucky, he got off with probably some sort of arrangement. However, the actual story has been buried. Alright, and a word about the so-called $100,000 drinks. Well, apparently that was just set up for one of the co-owners. This lady named Lin Samo from Taiwan, apparently she owned about 20% of the club. She used the club to launder money. And if you're going to launder money, you need to have something very expensive on the bill. So it was on purpose. So in one shot, in one night, you can basically claim to have spent like $200,000, and then so whatever she was trying to do in terms of launder money, she was able to run this amount of money through the club. So she set up a MD, a person basically who never really worked there, and then she would send that money through that person and then send the rest of the money through to her bank accounts. And most likely she probably used that money then probably to buy Korean real estate to further then clean her money. And she was apparently like a huge fan of like YG and G-Dragon. She bought the apartment right next to G-Dragon at Galleria 4A. And she didn't even live there. I've been in that building once or twice, and that building is super ritzy and got amazing views. The windows are to die for. But the parking lot, yeah, it does feel like a spoiled kids. Like spoiled kids live there, because it was just like dripping with way too many like fancy cars where whatever. Okay. All right. So let's go over this whole thing about MDs. What are marketing directors? So they are the people, if you've ever seen advertisements for clubs in Korea, you will see kind of like a photo of a club, maybe a phone number, a private like cell phone number of somebody, and you call them and they can kind of be like your hookup into the club. So these are people whose job it is to try to drum up VIP business. So I guess in the States it'd just basically be like VIP bottle service, but this is like on a whole different scale. What they're trying to do is pull in thousands and thousands of more dollars than that by enticing people with probably more than just a table and some bottle service. So originally it was just mainly meant to be like marketing director and a way for these people to sort of make a name for themselves, to be attached to clubs and kind of the celebrity lifestyle, and to basically kind of like be known as the person that had kind of like the inside track. So, you know, feel like one of these people are like, oh yeah, you know, I know somebody at a club, like they can get us a table, they could get us in. So these were these types of people that you can call and like, boom, like you don't have to wait in line, you don't have to, you know, they take care of everything, you just give them a lot of money and boom, you're in there. Now it got a lot seedier and crazier, and this is where there was an international connection. They started to get more global because they realized that there were a lot of people overseas that really wanted to hook up and really wanted a VIP experience when they came to Korea, especially in the club world. And they found out like a lot of these rich kids from like China and Southeast Asia wanted to come to Korea. They wanted the Hallyu experience, and they wanted a drug experience, and they wanted a sexual experience. And they feel, even though like all these things, well, not all these things, but even the drug thing is very strict in Korea, I guess it's less strict over, especially in China. I guess like if you get caught there, you're dead. But for them, they feel like maybe it's safer in Korea, so that they'll just come over here to do it. And of course, probably like, yeah, the sexual thing is probably a lot easier in Korea. And so they are also used to getting whatever they want at the snap of a finger, right? And Korea is also a culture that caters to that if you just have the right amount of money. And so these MDs have been able to cultivate this culture of like, just call me and I'll hook you up with anything. So generally how it works is that like there's like a $10,000 minimum if you want to be like a VIP, and you at that point you get a room in one of these clubs, and they're basically your point person for the entire night. You know, as we've seen in some of these videos, like the guy that first went to jail, Mr. Cho, who was the MD who specialized in drugs, was like shown on a video like bragging about how he was connected to all of these politicians' sons and other, you know, bigwigs in terms of like providing them with whatever they wanted. So the MDs at the clubs will lead girls that they find out in the regular club area to the rooms of the VIPs. So it sort of starts to now combine and merge as a hybrid of all the different drinking and nighttime cultures of Korea. In the past, there was these kind of things called booking clubs, where that's exactly what would happen. They would have these people who worked at the clubs drag girls into rooms, and girls would just kind of sit there and maybe have a drink or two, and it's like a forced meeting and interaction. Yeah, a little seedy, but at the same time, in some ways, it sort of kind of got the job done for girls and guys if you looked at it in a sort of innocent way, where like you did get to meet people and like that kind of like icebreaker was done by the club. Now it's totally seedy, where basically it's almost like facilitated sexual assault because the odds have totally gone way out of favor. It's not now an icebreaker. It's really about just throwing girls to the lion's pit. How much money do these MDs make? About $10,000 to $20,000 a month, maybe more if there are drugs involved. But we do have to go on a little bit of a tangent. There is another class of MDs that supply girls, and mainly underage girls. And they recruit mainly runaway girls. And again, this has some connection to the SJM case. Remember, SJM's case was first misfiled under runaway missing girl. Is it any coincidence that the police were really in that category? So what these MDs do is find these girls, give them this false hope of like, hey, just work here for about 2 to 3 years for me, and you'll most likely have a great shot at becoming a celebrity. We're gonna give you plastic surgery, we're gonna give you an apartment, like a studio apartment. And then what they do is that they put them into the whole room salon trade. And then they put them into, I guess, the club circuit. I'm not exactly sure like who stays in the room salon circuit, who goes into the club circuit. Maybe it's the personality, like people who talk really well probably stay in the room salon game, and then the ones who don't talk well but like kind of dance and do all, are more like a party girl would probably go to the club. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if that's how it works, but that's how I would do it if I ran it. So these MDs can make up to $100,000 a month. So you see how much money is in this game? This is why there are so many people who probably, would do a lot to keep this racket going. But unfortunately for these girls, one of the reporters said that he's met 2 of them. One of them is being treated for post-traumatic stress disorder after being tossed out. They didn't get a chance to become a celebrity. They were tossed out after the end of 2 to 3 years, totally ravaged by the situation. And then the other girl had too many abortions that her like uterus was like falling out and then thrown out because they're like, oh, we don't have any use for you anymore. He's saying that there are a lot of tragic stories like this all around this whole industry in Gangnam. So that's the environment in this club. It's a mixture of these girls that are professional, that are put there, probably most likely when you can't necessarily count on the regular customer clientele. Like if you have VIPs that definitely need to go home with like a hot girl, you're gonna bring in some of the prostitutes that, especially that Seungni was accused of and convicted of doing. And you're also trying to get the MDs to get the real girls to come in and then get drugged, because that has now become the sport and the game for these guys. Because remember, these guys that are these VIPs, they've probably just done the room salon thing, done the whole prostitute thing. They're so tired of that. They want real girls, but obviously, if they're so used, they can't probably, get them. So this is a way for them to have that as a sure thing, and this has been a way to systematize and commodify rape. That is the horrible state that was Burning Sun. So you see how it was not necessarily about prostitution going to international investors by a K-pop idol. That in itself, with money laundering and underhanded drug trade, happened and is bad. But the main story, because that happens, but the main story that was shocking and that actually hurts a lot more people are ordinary people being like packaged like derivatives or something, like in a faulty financial product, into a system for rape. those are the MDs. When you hear about MD this, MD that, when you hear about the Burning Sun case, they're not talking about medical doctors. They're talking about marketing directors, and they are essentially the people that make it rain, make the things happen in terms of this being that point person for drugs, girls, and making all of it flow. They're the ones that make a lot of money, but they're also not necessarily the people who are the main culprits, but they are the people with probably the most amount of information. So when you saw early on in this case, they were the ones who got nabbed quickly and quietly. And when their mouths were shut, then the story shifted away from the real story. And here's another tidbit. The reason why this is so scandalous is that this was so well mapped out. And again, with this whole SJM case and everything that we've been talking on this channel, the part that makes this corruption so frustrating is how well mapped out and strategic this is. The use of GHB, which is like that date rape drug, is very hard to nab. It's also not very well established here in Korea, but one of the reporters said that even if the victim goes to the police, the properties of the drug make it look like if you see the people on the CCTV camera, the person doesn't look that drugged. That they look like they're sort of cognizant and they're sort of compliant, or they're sort of like acting normally, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but and then they also said that it's harder to prosecute and it's easier for the police to kind of lead them astray when they're trying to take a statement. So if the police are already on the side of the club and being bought off, that is an easy drug for them to not help the witness with. Also, the girls black out, so they can't remember. And so by the very nature of this drug, they were able to figure out a way where the perpetrators had the most chance of getting away with this. And apparently even high-level officials, from prosecutors to like the tax officials, were seen at the club, and they stuck out like sore thumbs. Like 50-year-old men were seen there, and they were seen going to the connected hotel rooms with younger women. And so they were all on the take. This was all so coordinated and planned. And if you saw from a lot of the testimony, or for a lot of the reporters that dug into this case, there was a lot of bragging by Seungni and the people who were associated with this business, saying that, oh, we are so connected with the police, we're so connected with everybody that, if anybody tries to challenge us, they're gonna go down. Yes, and the thing that got me upset was this tight collusion with the police, and it is very clear that this did happen. So where do we have some more evidence that there was total collusion with the police, especially at this club? Well, there was a former security guard who testified or gave an account to the media, saying that if anybody had ever called the club, also, part of the technique was after you dragged this normal girl to the hotel,
tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.